We're on. Good evening, everybody. Sorry for the lateness. We've had a few RT problems, but we are to start. The Planning Control Committee, Thursday the 25th of April 2024 at 6:09, I make it, something like that. Welcome, everybody. Do we have any apologies, please?
Chair, I've got apologies from councillors Prosser, Hassel and Evans.
Thank you, Stephen. Any late items? There are none. Declarations of interest.
There we go, sorry. Yes, it's not a pecuniary interest, but I do work for the Hospital Trust, but it's within a department, not in the Directorate of Car Parking or anything related to that. Thank you. And I'm comfortable in having an open mind and making a decision this evening.
Chair, I've spoken to Councillor Holmes and I'm happy with that.
Oh, lovely. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Stephen. Item 4, appeal decisions. Ian, I'm trying to find it. Is there?
Thank you, Chair. Just to report tonight, and both of them small residential schemes. The first one at Ash Close, Alistry, was for one unit in an established residential area on a relatively small site. The second being a similar proposition, land at St Joseph's Roman Catholic Church on Burton Road, which members may be aware of, is on a fairly steeply sloping site in a quite a nicely treed context. We refused permission for both schemes, and the inspector agreed on both occasions. The first one was character impact on neighbouring residents and also living environment created. The second, impact on living conditions for future occupants and trees within the site. Of course, as you'll be aware, paragraph 11D of the framework is active because we are in a tilted balance situation. So they're both good results in the context of that, because as paragraph 11D states, you should be granting planning permission unless the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And in this case, the inspector agreed on both occasions. So good results, Chair. I would encourage members to read those notices. They're fairly comprehensive, and the one at St Joseph's Catholic Church includes quite a useful paragraph about people who live in close proximity to trees and the living conditions and future impact on those trees. So useful. Play 2-1-2 there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. We move on now to the applications to be considered. We are doing them in the order as stated. So we start with item 5.1, the Rycote Centre, Parker Street. And Aaron, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, housekeeping item. On page 14 of the report, I suggest the deletion of condition 5 as it duplicates the requirements of condition 6. Also, the inclusion of a land contamination condition. This application relates to a site located at Parker Street and Kedleston Road in the Struts Park area. The site is currently vacant and was formerly used as an adult learning centre operated by the City Council. There are 2 points of access off Kedleston Road and Parker Street. Full permission is sought for the demolition of the existing storage building and canopy, external alterations associated with the refurbishment of the main building, installation of solar panels to the roof, an external multi-use games area, alterations to the car and cycle parking layout, landscaping, boundary fencing and other ancillary works. The intention is for an SEN school facility for children aged between 3 and 19 years, approximately 70 pupils and 43 staff with 13 classrooms. Operating hours are stated between 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. The application site benefits from an established land use for education use, and the intended end user for the site also falls within the same use class, and therefore there's no material change of use to consider with this application. The design and amenity implications are discussed in the report and are deemed acceptable. Elsewhere, subject to tree protection measures, the on-site trees would not be harmed. With regards to highway impacts, the highway officer does raise concern with potential congestion, traffic and insufficient parking arising from the development. All the submitted information points to Parker Street being the main point of access for parents' drop-off and collection, with the Kedleston Road access being secondary for minibus, staff and deliveries. That being said, there may be some additional congestion along this part of Kedleston Road during school drop-off and collection times, but the council has little control through this application over the existing access arrangement to and from Kedleston Road and Parker Street access. There's a neighbouring residential care home also shares the use of the private access drive off Kedleston Road together with a small office occupier. Undoubtedly, there will be an increase in vehicular movement along this access drive, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it becomes a dangerous route for others to use. Some objectors raise the matter of potential dangers to elderly residents from the adjacent care home. Whilst some residents may use the access road to walk to and from Kedleston Road, a narrow footpath does exist either side of this private access road. Whether the footpath can be suitably widened without compromising the road width is a matter the care home may pursue, but this is not part of the planning application. The scope of the application is limited to those elements discussed in section 7 of the report, and in all respects the development would be acceptable against relevant policies. As the proposed development consists mostly of building refurbishment and minor external works, contextually the extent of development is quite minimal. There may be some implications for the highway network as a result of the development, but given the nature of the application and existing permitted use of the site for education use, it's concluded that the proposal would be reasonable in planning terms. With the occupier school adhering to a management plan and other conditions listed below, any material planning impacts would be sufficiently mitigated. For the reasons given in section 7 of the report, a recommendation is given to grant permission with conditions. Chair, there are 2 speakers to address committee.
Thank you, Aaron. We'll go for our first speaker. That is Mr. Gostling, please. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Hi, good evening. My name's Adam Gostling. I'm a director at HGH Consulting. I'm here to represent the Aurora Group, who are the applicant on this scheme. The Aurora Group are a provider of education, care and support for children, young people and adults with special educational needs. We've been working closely with Derby City Council in respect of the need for this facility, including conversations with Paula Nightingale, the Head of Inclusion Services, and Daniel Marsden, the SEND manager, and both of those have confirmed that there is a need for the additional SEN placements in Derby City that the Rycote Centre proposal will deliver. It's a purpose-built existing facility that's in quite poor state of repair and in need of modernisation. Its current use, as the officer has just said, is exactly the use that we're intending to put the building to, so there is no change of use. It's purely improvements to the building fabric itself, and the only new development is the inclusion of a multi-use games area outdoors for the children to use, and we've agreed with Environmental Health that this will be restricted in terms of the hours of use to ensure that there is no detrimental impact to neighbours. The officers mentioned highways and traffic. I'd just like to point out to the members of the committee and everybody present that, as I said earlier, the operator could move in tomorrow and start operating from this facility. There's no restriction at all. What we want to do here is make the building fit for purpose and put it into use for SEN kids with significant needs within the borough. And at that point, I will finish. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you very much. Ms. Blythe, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me now? Yes, my name's Jill Blythe. I'm the manager, the development manager at Hawthorne Court. We are not a care home, we're retirement living, consisting of 45 retirement flats. I have a total of 52 residents. 21 of those are over the age of 80, 14 of them are over the age of 90. 11 of my residents walk with walking frames, and because the pedestrian walkway is so narrow on that stretch of driveway, they walk on the road because, as I say, the pedestrian walkway is so narrow. We're really concerned, I'm speaking on behalf of the residents here, we're really concerned, all of us, about the increase in traffic. The existing visitors are relating to ambulances, carers, sometimes 4 times a day, family, friends, food deliveries, all the supermarkets, Amazon, all the usual deliveries, and contract workmen. So it's already a very, very busy driveway. As I say, the pedestrian walkway is extremely narrow, and so the residents walk on the road. And they have walking frames which are slightly wider than the pedestrian walkway. So we are very, very concerned about it. I've sent photographs in of 2 of my residents over the age of 90 walking very precariously on the walkway. What I would like is that a committee of you came out and actually looked at our access and assessed it. I don't know whether anybody has been out to have a look at it, but I would like to request that. And if this goes ahead, then I would like some measures to be taken in so much as the access be widened slightly. There's an area of vegetation, as you can see on the right-hand side, which could be reduced, and the walkway moved slightly back, enabling the other side, the opposite side, to be widened. That is what I would like to request. And the traffic entering from the Kedleston Road, from the Derby, if they're accessing from Derby, there's a blind bend there, and there was actually an accident there on Friday involving a cyclist and a car, and so we feel it's very dangerous. You know, traffic calming measures I would like to be put in place if this thing goes through, and that would be my request. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you could switch your microphone off, please. Lovely, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Aaron, do you want to come back on any of those points raised, please?
Perhaps I could defer it to the highway officer to perhaps comment on in terms of the widening of the footpath.
Andy, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Aaron. I think very quickly, I think we have to come back to this point about what this application is for. It's for the demolition of part of the building and also, you know, doing something to the frontage. It's not about access. I think we have to be very clear about that. And, you know, I think some of the issues that have been raised aren't for the Highway Authority. You know, we have no control over this. And I think it's really down to the occupant and the residents around there and their relationship with each other. Whether the applicant wants to widen Kedleston Road access, I think that's down to them. It's the private access, it's their access. But what I will say is that the applicant has put forward a management strategy. It does sound like actually the care home sounds pretty busy to me in terms of deliveries, Amazon, and everything else. And I think in terms of this centre, I don't think the Kedleston Road access will form its major access. I think it will be the back of Parker Street. I think it's really where we've raised concerns in terms of the children being dropped off and the potential impacts that will have on Parker Street and probably the residents who live around it. A beat that it's likely to be quite a short period of time, as with any school. But again, we have no control over that. I think the Kettleston Road access within their management strategy is going to be a secondary access, which will be, I think, for their deliveries, maybe up to 4 minibuses they've suggested, and obviously any refuge. So I don't think I can really add much more to that, or really provide any anything that can be added to the consent condition-wise. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Committee, Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening. I have read the document, and as Aaron outlined in his opening remarks, the land use has already been established because of the previous occupier of the land. Two of my concerns, firstly, the mugger. In my previous ward, I did have experience of a multi-use game area. Just clarify what the mugger meant. And it did cause some issues for the local residents who live nearby. Now, I can't see on the plan where this mugger is going to be situated. Is it north, the north tip? Yeah. When I looked at the conditions, I noticed it's 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. I wonder if those could be narrowed down somewhat, because I know from experience it can be a nuisance to residential area. And the second point I was going to raise is the highways issue, but obviously I bear in mind it isn't our total responsibility. But could we perhaps get some joint working with the applicant and Hawthorne Court, because clearly what's been outlined by the second speaker, forgive me, Ms Blythe, it is an issue for me, because we don't want any casualties. And I'm sure those of us who have got experience of a school governor or going to schools, obviously there are, as we all know, Chair, when you're dropping off, picking up, there are bound to be more traffic congestion at those times. I do know the area very well, having my parents both lived in the area. I was wondering if we could have some sort of traffic calming, particularly off the Kettleston Road access, and looking at the Parker Street. And I know, obviously, Parker Street is quite congested anyway, when I last drove down there a few weeks ago. So perhaps both entrances ought to be looked at in some way. Ah, that's a better view, thank you. Kettleston Road, as we know, is a busy road, and as is Parker Street for the residents around that part of the city. So the mugger are my main concern, and also the entrances from Kettleston Road mainly, and Parker Street. If there can be some joint working on that for the safety of not only the people who will be attending the school and the pupils, but also the Hawthorne Court residents. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Morgan McGee.
Thanks, Chair. I'm familiar with the site from its days as adult learning service, and I appreciate the comments that have been made and agree with many of them. It would be nice to see the building in use as an educational facility again, and I don't think anyone's against that. And what's the alternative, Chair? That it will be either try to fit the use into the current state of the building, or leave it to go and deteriorate. Having said that, and similar to Councillor Bolton, I've got a query around the games area, and that's particularly around the security of the games area. So I can't see any detail around how it will be secured and access after hours be prevented. And I think that's quite important to get to the bottom of.
Thank you. So you can't come in. That's the only trouble. I do apologise. And I do agree with you there. I would assume, and I am assuming, that there would be a condition set about the mugger, and that it's going to be in the use when the kids are at the school. So that's the main thing. And again, I would assume that security would be there when the school is closed, and the mugger would be closed as well.
But I guess all we can do is assume at this point.
Assume at this point.
Okay.
Whether there's something we can put it. Do you want to come on that, Paul? Oh, Aaron.
Chair, if I could clarify, there is a weld mesh fencing proposed to go round the mugger, which is 2.5 metres in height. That would be gated as well. So there will be some on-site security in terms of the accessing the mugger out of hours. In terms of the condition from use only between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m, that was suggested in the Environmental Health Consult response and agreed with the agent applicant. If, Councillor Bolton, you think that time needs revising, you know, what times would you want to see a condition altered? Because it's obviously the operation of the SEN school as well is a consideration here.
Yeah, I think 9 a.m. I think would be preferable. 7 p.m. obviously in the summer evenings, students might want to play outside. But clearly I think the 8 a.m. needs to be moved on, in my opinion, and I'll leave it to committee. Perhaps 9 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Councillor Holmes, Councillor Morgan McGee, and then Councillor
Thank you.
Kerr.
I think we need to be cautious in placing too restrictive conditions. School days and working days do start 8 a.m, probably sooner in some circumstances, and I think it would be remiss of us to be too restrictive. I think probably as a compromise, if there are concerns, is that we should allow the hours that are in the report, which have been negotiated and discussed between officers and the applicant, and then maybe have a review if there are any issues arising from those times of use. I think we've got to be very careful being too restrictive. I think the hours are reasonable as are in the report currently.
Councillor Morgan McGee.
Thanks again, Chair, and thank you, Aaron, for the clarification on security. Apologies if I missed that detail. Just a couple more points to address for me. One is that, yes, the footpath towards Kettleston Road does not appear fit for purpose. It never has been fit for purpose in my knowledge. But I have to say, through you, Chair, that it's not a matter for this committee to consider. So I would suggest that through you again, that person contacts their local councillor to discuss or raise that matter through different channels. That's just friendly advice. Remaining concern then is about the traffic. However, because this application is just for minor alterations, it's not something in our remit, and I don't believe we can consider that any further either, in which case I would move approval to grant permission. Thank you.
We'll just have Councillor Kerr and Councillor Nowers just want to make a few points first, but yeah, consider that. Thank you. Councillor Kerr, sorry.
Thank you. Like other people, I would be pleased to see this building back into active use and to have the refurbishment done. I'm mindful that a lot of the work could be done without coming to committee at all. You know, there's been lots of people have said it's no change of use here. However, we have got the detail in our report to say that there would be 70 pupils and 43 full-time equivalent staff when it's fully occupied. My experience of schools is that the majority of staff do tend to drive. A large proportion of pupils will be coming from not the immediate area, and they are likely to be driven, so it's good to know that there are likely to be minibuses bringing a number of children at a time rather than all individual cars or taxis. However, if we're not going to impact on local streets, I think it's going to be really important to make the walking and cycling opportunity to here as good as it can be. And I think that that is how this could be a good neighbour to the people around it. So I don't think it's something we can insist on, but I would welcome an informative note about how to work with the council to make the accesses of both Parker Street and Kettleston Road look as though they are pedestrian priority by not having curbed crossings, as they both have at the moment, but so to continuous footway, because I think that will help drivers to think, I need to slow down, there might be pedestrians ahead of me. And I think that will change the nature of the way in which people drive on and off the site, which will make it seem more attractive to people who could walk or cycle, and for those who are other users incidental in that area. We can't insist on it, but I think an informative note might be helpful. I just want to comment about the times that people have raised. The report here says that there'll be staggered start and finishes, which I think is creative of the applicant, at 9:05 and 9:20, and finishing at 2:30 and 2:45. Now, either those times are wrong, or it's a really short school day, but yet they say the site's going to be open from 7:30 in the morning until 7:30 in the evening, Monday to Friday. So maybe there are going to be after-school clubs, which aren't mentioned, or other sorts of educational activities happening which aren't specifically mentioned. So I think we could, I think cutting off the timing for the mugger is, it certainly shouldn't be outside the operational times of the school, because I think it needs some oversight. Somebody's going to need to lock and unlock the gates. It is going to have some sort of acoustic barrier around it to provide shuttering as another condition, which I think is helpful. But it just seems slightly strange. I don't know if Aaron's got any advice on that. My final point, which I should have stuck in with the access, is actually the cycle parking. Because as it stands, the cycle parking is the closest point to the public access. And I don't think it's covered. I couldn't tell whether it was covered or not, but it should be. And it's also not good for security to put cycle parking nearest to the public access point. And if there's any opportunity, again, I don't think we can condition it given the application, but if we can, it would be nice to. But if we can't, again, a note about how to encourage people to cycle, and one of those is to make sure cycle parking is secure and covered. Convenient. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Aaron, have you got any thoughts on those?
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Kerr. In terms of an informative note for pedestrian priority, continuous footway, yes, certainly we can put that as an informative note. In terms of cycle parking provision, it is currently shown off the Parker Street access close to the gate, and that is the only cycle parking provision shown. If you wish for an informative note to be placed also that should include as much cycle parking provision as possible within the site, we can do that. In terms of the finish times of the formal school day or education, I guess it isn't unusual for there to be outside activities, outside of school hours activities and staff training, school-related events beyond the school day. So I think that 7:30 p.m. time stated in the design access statement and all the submitted information is no doubt for allowance for other school-related activities outside the formal day, which isn't unusual in terms of the context here of a school. Hopefully that provides some clarification.
Thanks, Aaron. Councillor Nawaz?
My question's been answered. I think we should move to the vote. Sorry.
Who wants to say anything?
Thanks, Chair. So I would just like to say with regards to the mugger, this is a school, and I'm not sure we would want to limit, other schools, in this manner, because again, and this is not just a school, but it's a school for children with special needs who sometimes may need sensory intervention or to go outside to just help them. So I think we should have that at the back of our minds. And other schools are close to some residential homes. Do we then go round curtailing activities for these children? It's just some of the things we should have at the back of our minds. So I do think we should not be looking at changing the times in the application.
Thank you. Mr. Woodhead.
Thank you, Chair. I think Aaron's covered everything off with the exchange, within the exchange. I would suggest that condition 3, which is the use of the mugger, if we agree the precise wording of that with you and Councillor Kerr as Vice Chair, and then within that we could build in a review mechanism so that management of the mugger is reviewed every 12 months or something like that, so that if it's creating a problem, we can do something about it. But also we could, add an informative note, and the applicant's agent's in the room, so he knows what the tone of the discussions is. So, thank you, Chair.
Happy with that, Ian? Lucy, okay on that? I've got a nod from the back of the table as well. Would somebody like to move to the vote? Councillor Bolt, move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for the speakers. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We move to item 5.2, which is the Friargate Goods Yard and the bonded warehouse, etc. Paul, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief, but I won't. Chair, you have had late items circulated. This report relates to the redevelopment of the Friargate Goods Yard site, as shown on the slide. It is split into 2 separate applications. The first one being planning, which is the restoration of the listed bonded warehouse and engine shed for commercial uses, and the erection of 276 dwellings. That's a mix of 227 townhouses and a 49-unit apartment block on Stafford Street, which is, for those who know it, the former Wilkinson's Yard, together with partial demolition of the railway arches. The second application, the listed building consent application, is for the restoration, alteration and conversion of the Grade 2 listed bonded warehouse and engine house, together with the demolition of the existing arches adjacent to Friargate Bridge, with partial retention of a facade. Firstly, the planning application. And Chair, we have speakers on this one, which we'll come to later. Page 19 of your report lists in more detail the developer's proposals on this site, with the accompanying suite of documents listed on page 20. I wouldn't normally bring in section 106 at this stage, but I think it's relevant to bring it in now because it weaves a neat pattern through the rest of the report. So, with regard to section 106, when a developer claims that providing section 106 or meeting section 106 contributions would make the development unviable, as members will know, we engage the district valuer to undertake a detailed independent assessment of the costs and values associated with this proposal. It's going to be costly to rebuild, renovate those listed buildings on site, and in doing so, the DV has come back to us to conclude that no financial section 106 contributions or affordable housing can be viably provided on this development. Members will be familiar with the approach usually taken on such sites where viability problems are being agreed with the developer to review that viability at a certain period once they've got their planning permission or at the end of the development, with contributions sought if the viability has improved enough. It's a clawback or an overage review. In this instance, however, the developers have indicated that due to the risks involved in funding this complex scheme, it's not possible to enter into an overage agreement. They have, however, despite the viability challenges, offered to make a significant contribution towards off-site infrastructure. This will, in the first instance, go towards providing additional pupil spaces at Ashgate Primary School, which does not have enough spaces to meet the demands of the development. Any remaining balance will go towards other off-site infrastructure not being provided during the life of the development, such as sports provision, community centres, health and or affordable housing. This contribution is on top of the comprehensive scheme of open space, public realm improvements and, importantly, the restoration of the listed bonded warehouse and engine house as outlined in the report. Whilst a review mechanism could capture all the contributions not being provided, That would make the would make the Section 106 policy compliant. There is no guarantee at that future stage we would get anything. Given the independently verified viability position and the benefits associated with bringing this long derelict, including 2 listed assets, scheme back into use, contributed to Derby's housing need, along with the development risks, I am prepared to accept that in this instance, taking guaranteed contribution during the life of the development outweighs the possibility of securing contributions in the future. I want to raise this now as obviously a significance going forward as we progress through the presentation. So, from your report and in detail, there are no highway objections. Structures colleagues have suggested conditions regarding works and the stability of work associated with Friargate Bridge. That's a technical appraisal approach. Conservation and Heritage Committee have no objections. They welcome the scheme as a whole, supportive of the investment to rescue and repurpose the historic site. You've had updates from Heritage Conservation comments circulated, which, following the viability report from the District Valuer, note that the less than substantial harm to the heritage assets, suggesting conditions to see the development brought forward in a phased manner. Active Travel England object to the shortfall in cycle parking and accessibility for all users, despite the cycle parking provision at each of the houses on the site and cycle parking being provided in the main bonded warehouse. Historic England note the very positive proposals subject to understanding the finer detail, noting that designs reflect the significance of the site. The Victorian Society and Historic Buildings and Places have detailed points of concern. The retention of more of the arches being sought. You will note that consultee responses are generally positive, suggesting conditions to refine the detail. You'll also note there are around 40 conditions in the report. This proposal is both for commercial and housing provision. In terms of the latter, you'll recall, as page 49 suggests, that the tilted balance is enacted and that planning permission should be granted unless the application of policies in the NPPF that protect areas or assets of particular importance provides a clear reason for refusing the development, or any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies of the NPPF as a whole. Pages 50 to 77, I know you've all read it and you know it intimately, take you step by step through the component issues. So, in principle, the regeneration of this long derelict site for 276 dwellings and bringing the 2 important listed buildings back into use is welcomed and policy consistent for regeneration. Under the heritage heading, overall the security of the long-term future of the at-risk bonded warehouse and engine house is to be welcomed. The scheme necessitates the demolition of the arches abutting Friargate Bridge to provide an additional developable area. Back to the viability of the scheme. To retain them would require considerable investment in an already unviable scheme. Indeed, 3 additional assessments and costings for a schedule of retention of some or all of the arches have been assessed by the district valuer and found unviable. Paragraph 20 of the NPPF is referenced on page 53 of the report, where we should not permit the loss of whole or part of heritage assets without taking all reasonable steps to ensure the new development will proceed after the loss. There is a phasing condition attached to the suggested conditions, and on slide you'll see the phasing elements where the developer is proposing to do phase 1 and phase 1A. Phase 1A includes considerable expense, the 2 listed buildings, the 2 listed assets, and then we move round to phase 2, 3, 4 and 5 as it's shown on the slide. I have comfort that the Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee and Historic England acknowledge the difficulty in developing the site, accepting the principle based upon the proposed development, restoration of the heritage assets and their long-term viable use and robust justification provided. This less than substantial harm would need to be weighed against the benefits of the scheme. Harm versus benefits are bullet pointed in on pages 62 and 63 of your report. In my opinion and judgment, this scheme overall is one to be welcomed and supported. Subject to securing the contribution referred to at the start through the Section 106 agreement, your recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to 47 conditions. The eagle-eyed amongst you will spot we've got 48 in there. I'd like to take one out on mature reflection. Condition 8 does not meet the prescribed tests and would be unreasonable. Chair, you have 2 speakers on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Start with Mr. Dickens. You have 3 minutes, sir.
James Dickens, Managing Director of Waversmere Homes. Our commitment to Derby is to build 2,000 homes in 10 years, and we're almost halfway through that now with Nightingale alone. Frigate's Good Yard was closed 56 years ago, and it was acquired by Clowes in 1982. This deal has taken 5 years to get to this point, and it was the second site I saw when I first came to Derby, but this was the site I wanted over the DRI. This landmark needs to be reanimated. It cannot turn its back onto the community, and it needs to be a public building. Our application proposes 276 homes, 2 and 3 bedroom houses, which will be energy rated A, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. The bonded warehouse itself will incorporate a restaurant, deli, with the same operator as the Pepper Pot, which was a double award winner with the Civic Society, a co-working space with the world's largest provider, IWG, gym, further offices, and a solar farm on the roof with the image you can see on screen now. The engine house will become Waversmere's East Midlands headquarters and will be the premises where we will do the balance of our 2,000 homes. Over the past 12 months, our scheme has been carefully curated with extensive consultation. There is an acute need for city centre housing, and we've witnessed this firsthand with the Nightingale Quarter. This is a unique opportunity for this volume in the city centre, and housing makes the bonded warehouse reanimation viable. No grant funding is needed for this. It stands on its own 2 feet. Paul kindly mentioned the district valuer, but it is our commitment to provide £500,000 of primary education because we are building homes for families and local people. The public realm work is extensive. The Frigates Bridge and the steps up to it, the Micmac Way and cycle route, and the connection back through to South Street, totalling £2.1 million, will be provided within 4 years. Commitment to the Friends of Friargate Bridge, again, is equally important to us. This asset needs to be saved, and we will collaborate with the Friends and help them with their funding. Friargate, as I said, has been derelict for 50 years, and as we have on Nightingale Quarter, with your support, we will deliver on our promise and provide much-needed housing in the centre of Derby, focusing on brownfield first, energy efficiency, and most importantly, saving these magnificent heritage assets and bringing them back into public use for generations. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Our second speaker, Mr. Aspdin. Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes, sir. Can you switch your microphone on, please?
Right. Thank you, Chair. I want to address you on central required improvements to the public right-of-way access steps from South Street for pedestrians, disabled and cyclists. The scheme provides for no improvement at all. This is wrong and bizarre in times of greater consideration of disabled access and sustainable travel. The committee have already had the opportunity to read my original formally filed comments to this application, an extract of which is, quote, I would ask that very careful consideration should be given to access to the site from South Street for cyclists and pedestrians and disabled. The current steps are unsatisfactory for even pedestrians and are entirely unusable for disabled or for cyclists. In past applications, I've raised this point twice with both Development Control and Clowes. The steps are a problem of which everyone is aware. If the developers now contend that there is insufficient space to improve these steps, it's because they have developed or sold land to school playing fields and now plan to build housing on the small amount of land required for improvements to the steps. In 2011, Clowes' own transport assessment report for the site stated, and I quote, "Various connections will be provided through the northern site boundary to link with the neighbouring residential areas around South Street and York Street. Consultations were held with the Derby Cycling Group, who would wish to see good pedestrian and cycle access into the site. I personally attended a site meeting with Mr. Bock of Clowes in 2011 and recall that Clowes well understood the issue of the dangerous steps, and they wished to ensure this could never be an obstacle to planning approval. In the rush to get this application to the approval stage, it appears the past consultations, assurances, and valuable knowledge of the site have been pushed aside by the developers and development control. I urge the committee to resolve today in such a way that these steps from South Street must be readdressed by all parties and significant improvements be made as a strict condition of any approval before building work commences adjacent to the steps. I understand the Chair might grant me a very short extension of time to weave in a late point. Approval of the scheme without strict conditions of improvement may inadvertently cause significant development starting delays if there were to be objections to the public right-of-way diversion. Any diversion order would be an entirely separate legal process, and it has not yet commenced. It could possibly delay the start of the development by months or even years in the event of an objection. There might be very valid grounds for objection to a diversion order where the developer has planned to build on land that would, but for those new buildings, be available for improvements to the South Street steps.
Your time is up, sir. Everybody's had 3 minutes, so thank you very much for that. Thank you. Paul, would you like to come back on any of those comments?
Shall I focus on the steps? Yes, please. We were looking at this earlier today in the office, that the current public footpath between South Street and Great Northern Road is actually a relocated railway footbridge. There was a railway footbridge from Ponsonby Terrace down to Great Northern Road. And when that was removed, steps were utilised in this footway across the site. There are steps at both ends, South Street and Great Northern Road. And I am told there's no evidence of any cycling rights along the footpath. We've always maintained that this is just a footpath, which is why there are steps off both ends. Thank you, James. On the plan, you will see in blue the line of the existing footpath. And outside of the planning process, the suggested line of its the footpath's relocation. Still goes from A to B, i.e. to the steps at north and south, but is diverted across the site using the linking into the Micmac route, which is to the to the left of on the slide, and to the right going back along the road into Friargate. It's not clear at this stage whether a wheeling ramp, I think that was in part of the presentation, would or could be achievable or acceptable to the local highway authority in those steps. The steps are public highway. And what I would say is that this development, for members who will know and went on the site, that you will know that the steps are currently boarded up. They're boarded up for a reason, the antisocial behaviour that takes place on the site, and it's not a nice place to walk across there. once the development's in place, there will be passive and active surveillance of that route. Sorry, of the revised route, the route in red, with steps at both ends. Now, I take on board Mr. Astin's points. What I wouldn't necessarily want the planning committee to get diverted into is approving a scheme which requires cycle access up the steps, and then you're encouraging implicitly cyclists to use a public footpath. So I don't think we should get diverted. There's a big picture here of all the merits of the scheme in terms of the absolute benefits. For those that did the site visit, you will know the condition of the site and how long it's been like that in Derby and the benefits that we can get from this scheme. So I wouldn't necessarily want you to get diverted on just what can we do with the steps. But I might need to come back, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Committee. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to the speakers we've had this evening, and also Mr. Clark, who's outlined the document to us. This is a landmark site in Derby, one that's been empty far too long, one that's been vacant. From my previous experience, we have had applications on this site in the past, and none of them have come to fruition. So I'm hopeful that this will get committee's approval this evening. The issues surrounding the site visit, a few of us did go on a month or two back, was really useful. We actually went inside the two listed buildings, the engine house and the bonded warehouse, and I think it was quite clearly agreed the way they could be made into the entertainment space and buildings. I think providing officers, then clearly that is to be welcomed. Also, the new homes on the site and apartments is something that we greatly need in Derby, and will obviously contribute to our housing allocation. The outlines on page 63 in the middle of the page there, with the construction and operational benefits regarding the scheme, the economic development and jobs that will bring to the city, I think, obviously at this time with the cost of living crisis, is to be welcomed as well. I was slightly disappointed in that we are not going to be keeping all the railway arches. I think they are an asset to that part of the city. But clearly I know some have already been demolished because of the state they were in. But I think it is unfortunate if we lose them all. Page 19, one of the bullet points, as you'll see in the report, I'd just like some further detail on that, because the bullet point, 1, 2, 3, 4, the sixth up from the bottom, if somebody could just expand on that a little bit for me, then I'll get a clearer picture. But on the whole, I welcome this scheme. This is a development site that's been standing idle in Derby for many, many years, as we've heard from the speaker, and it's something that I would support in developing that part of the city and the knock-on effect that will have on housing and economic development and, importantly, jobs. So I support the scheme, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. The point you just raised about the 6 up from the bottom, is that the demolition of the railway arches or the engine? Oh, it's 5 up from the bottom. 5 bullet points. So just, Paul, do you want to comment on that one? Sorry, Sarah.
I was there with you, Chair. On the slide in front of us, we have the retained arch facade. What that shows, Jane, have you got an aerial that you can go round the corner to show it? So that's effectively retaining one of the brick arches. And there you can see sort of the aerial view with the bridge and the arches on the right-hand side of the screen coming down, and the activity behind. So the bridge is at the end of the top of the steps. We've got a slide of the plans. So that is, and so So that is, as you look at it now, that's now, so that shows you the extent of retained arch. For those, well, I used to go to the cob shop, it was on the corner, and then there are 2 arches next to it, which will be retained. The remainder going into, and they do go a long way into the site, would be lost. And same on the other side. Now, what I failed to mention in my introduction, and I'm sorry, I think to give us, you and us, security to ensure, for instance, that the arches just don't get demolished and then nothing else happens. We've got that phasing plan and we've got a phasing condition because what we don't want to do is have that loss and then the development doesn't happen. So what we've got, yes, again on that plan, as part of phase 2, those arches would be renovated as part of phase 2. Phase 1 does take out more of the arches that are in, because they go a long way into the site. You've got an aerial of... Yeah. You can see from that slide, the arches go a significant way into the site, and just looking at it, if you can see the cars that are parked there, that's broadly the retained arches as part of this scheme. Everything after that into the site would go, but as I said, we've challenged this, and we've taken 3 alternative schemes back to the district valuer. Is it viable? Can the development afford to do it? Yeah, we'd love to retain everything, but we can't retain it all. And if you look at you can see how, you can see the light running through them at the moment. I think we are retaining as much as we can. It's weighing, decision makers, it's weighing in the balance. And partial demolition of the listed assets, those things that support the bridge and link up to the bridge, they're still going to be retained, the main bits, the cob shop and the 2 next door to it. I think the cherry on the cake is the bonded warehouse and the engine shed. You can see that. James was looking earlier at views of that from the inner ring road. You can see that. We opened it up, we put the inner ring road in, and it looks pretty awful. I think once the applicants start to make strides with that, that's going to be a focal point. And almost like round the corner, you've got the copper building. Everybody knows where the copper building is. You're going to know where that building is because you're going to be able to see it in all its glory, which is how it should be. I think I covered everything. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Morgan McGeehan first, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, like we've already heard, I welcome the investment and improvement in this area, and it certainly does mark an improvement to the area. The applicant's commitment and tenacity are clear, and they've got proven form in the city. I also like to express gratitude to the officers who've put their skillful negotiation into this for some time to get us where we are. It's regrettable that some of the heritage assets may be lost, but we have to accept the district valuer's findings. Perhaps as an alternative, the applicant will be willing to mount some historical information on what remains for public interest. But on to other matters. The remaining conditions are sensible and constructive, remaining after the removal of condition 8. I have to say, cycling and disabled access is important. I've listened to the speaker that we have here tonight, and it should be encouraged as much as possible, but not at the expense of the application. So making it conditional on an application where the viability is already right on the red line, I feel would be quite foolhardy, and I'm not minded to go down that route. Remaining concern, I know I sound like a broken record, but it's on highways. There has been a highways assessment. Highways haven't raised any particular objections, but to me it looks like what we're building is a rat run through a residential area, which does raise concerns for me. And I wonder if that potential has been assessed as part of the impact assessment.
Paul, yes.
That was one of our concerns in terms of avoiding traffic on Stafford Street. I'm going to nip through this estate. I don't know if we can zoom in. The element off the roundabout in the bottom of your slide, the road that goes up to then the sharp left-hand corner, on that corner are some bollards to stop that very manoeuvre. What this effectively is a very long cul-de-sac. In, out, off the roundabout at Stafford Street, Ring Road Junction. You cannot get through apart from emergency services down adjacent to the arches that we just talked about. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That clears it for me.
Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. I too do welcome this application in very many ways, bringing back into use this derelict site, which has been an eyesore and frankly a blot on the landscape for many years, and including the bringing back into use of the goods yard, the bonded warehouse building and the engine shed are indeed very positive, and I certainly want to see this development go ahead. However, I do have some concerns about the loss of the railway arches, or particularly as many of them as are proposed to be removed in the application. In my view, these are important, very important heritage assets in Derby's railway history, and their loss would definitely be detrimental. We don't have any other similar types of railway structure in Derby, and if they're removed, then the railway heritage from this part of Derby could be potentially lost. And I do think that it's a positive as much as possible to retain historical assets as part of redevelopment schemes, and I think the Nightingale Quarter is an excellent example of that, where the pepper pots and other older buildings have been mixed in, and that's really created a unique aspect and really improves the quality of the development. So that is what's happened on Nightingale Quarter is really to be commended. There would potentially, in my view, be multiple uses for those, such as bars or restaurants, workshops or other small businesses. So I really want to, Chair, satisfy myself that everything possible has been done in order to try and retain, if not all, but as many as possible of the arches as part of this development. So a couple of questions around that. I don't know if we've been able to look for external funding to contribute towards the project in terms of improving the viability of it. I do appreciate the arguments and what's been said about the viability. It is a tricky site in many ways, and the costs associated with renovating the two listed buildings are undoubtedly going to be significant. But have we, through the council, looked at any external funding to bring to the mix that might make it possible? Or alternatively, have a different mix of housing provision been explored? A higher density housing on the site, so for example 8 or 9 storey apartment buildings rather than 1 or 2 bedroomed houses, because it's I think this would be an ideal site, really very close to the city centre for some higher density housing, as has been successful at Castle Ward and at Nightingale Quarter. So just a couple of thoughts there, maybe if officers could come back on those, please.
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Funding, yes, we did. This site was one of the schemes we put forward for additional government funding, and were unsuccessful, and I cannot remember what funding it was, but we got funding for assembly rooms. I think it was in that package, but we have put forward this site for, obviously because of the significance of the list of buildings. This has been a pain in the side, blot on landscape for a long time. We wanted something to happen. Something needs to break the back, and the funding wasn't successful. We have thrown back, obviously, the challenge. We want to see as many of the arches retained as possible, hence going back to the district valuer. It's just not a viable and structurally appropriate, because there are structural problems with the arches as well as bringing them back into use. It would be great if we could keep them all. I think we've managed to successfully negotiate the best of what we've got and links through, so you will still know that there was a bridge there, there was abutments there, there was a station there, but it's not as extensive as you see now. In terms of higher density, you're in a balancing exercise there, because yeah, you could probably do higher properties, but then you run into the conflict of the impact on the setting of the listed buildings and conflict in the height of the buildings, obscuring those listed buildings. Thanks, James, that's useful. We have 3-storey already on elements of the site, and because there's a long run of properties, they are broken up, the ridge lines are broken up as they step up and down the site. But as you can see from that slide, you've got the bonded warehouse at the end of the street with the properties leading to it. It's all been designed so you can appreciate the listed buildings, but also it takes the lines of the railway. If you look on an aerial view of it, you're seeing the lines of the old railway and the sidings that used to be there. So we're trying to pick out, it probably won't be obvious on site, but you can try to pick out those sort of details. So the setting of the listed buildings were crucial to us, so we don't impact detrimentally on them, but they still get a quantum to enable the development to work and get the listed buildings brought back into use. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Bonser was next on my list. Then Councillor Kerr.
Did you use mine?
I don't think it's working. Can you hear me? Oh, sorry, I was pressing the wrong button. Thanks, Chair. Yes, I mean, first and foremost, very much in support of this application. It's a much neglected area, and it's on that situation in the city where it's a real gateway into the city. So it will be great to see that being brought back into use. The provision of hundreds of homes and this type of home as well, family housing, is just what we need in the city. So very much in support of that. And the sensitive use of those heritage assets creatively being used, in my opinion, to create that sort of central hub and the central area to the site. Just on the point around the steps, I appreciate the concerns around the access, but this is a footway, and many years ago it was my route to work, being able to cut through from, you know, on foot, and you don't necessarily want to bump into somebody speeding around on a cycle. It's a footpath. So, and there are the steps at the other end to negotiate, so you might sort it out at one end, but you've still got the other end to deal with. So, you know, I think it's important to have that access through to allow people from the sort of Normanton end and the Abbey end to get through to the Friargate Business District, which is where I worked years ago. So, yeah, very much in support of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bonser. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I'm pleased that we have in front of us something that shows that it's possible to develop that site in an economic manner. And I think that that is something that we need to hold on to. However, I have also some serious concerns. And I want to start by looking at page 37, which is something that wasn't highlighted to us at the beginning, which says, for the number of bed spaces shown on the plans, all of the properties are undersized when compared to national design space standards. One bedroom shown with a double bed only exceeds the recommended minimum for a single bed by half a square metre. And it concludes that section by saying, it should be noted that none of the properties would meet the standards that we would find acceptable for affordable homes. Now, we've had discussions in this chamber before where we have said that we will turn down applications for homes of multiple occupation because they are substandard. And I would really want to hear from somebody in housing about why they have come up with these really, I think, damning paragraphs on what look like beautiful houses. I don't particularly like the style of the windows, and I've said that before, but they look like attractive houses on the outside, but this is what we're being told in our report about the size of them. I share what other people have said about the loss of the arches, and I think that is really sad. There's also a comment here from our heritage team saying it's a pity that people didn't talk about this with us sooner, because we might have made I think the roads could have more accurately followed the lines of the railways, rather than being sort of indicative of general rather than more specific. And I think that that could have been a better reference for the heritage. Very little has been said about this being our local nature reserve. You can see, when we see the view of the site as it is at the moment, we can see there's a great sweep there of land that has just gone wild for the last 40 or 50 years. And wildlife has made use of it. And there are bits of it that are being retained, but they're becoming also very much reduced in size and fragmented, which isn't, we're always told that fragmenting things are not good. I think there are conditions here about the maintenance of those areas that are left, but it isn't something that's been highlighted to us as being an issue. That is an issue about dealing with the steps down onto South Street. And I share the concerns that other people have said about, the speaker has said, about that access point. I've used this route on a number of occasions as well, not as regularly as Councillor Bonser, but it is a route that I've used historically. In fact, wheeling my bicycle, but not always. Sometimes I've been on foot. But there is a solution within the council's potential to be able to change there, in that there is adjacent land which is currently operated or used by Derby Homes. It's got affordable housing on it, but the back area is underutilised and potentially could provide a zigzag route. At the moment, I think we would lose a lot of trees within that area if we were to try to impose something to come through. But you would then come through to the end of what will be the Micmac cycleway. So isn't it surprising that when we have access along a Micmac cycleway that will take you towards the university, towards the hospital, towards other opportunities and connections, that there's not sufficient cycle facilities there, that the Active Travel England is really critical of what is being proposed. It's no good, our highways people have said, this is city centre, access issues don't really matter because we're city centre. But people living there may be working at Rolls-Royce, they may be working at the university, they may be working at the hospital, and they want to travel from this convenient city centre site to somewhere else. So I think our highways comments have actually been a little bit disappointing in not thinking that everybody works in the city centre. Let's scroll down, sorry, to my final summing up comments, because I'm really sad that we've got a solution that has so many positives about what it's, rescuing the two key buildings there, but also doesn't meet the other needs. And it was quite interesting, maybe I'll just get somebody to see it, that if the view from coming down Mercian Way of the site, if you go slightly higher up and look back a few years, which Google Street View lets us do, and you can see the roof of the bonded warehouse. And the roof, the original roof, is even in skeleton form, which is all you get, is actually much more interesting than the flat roof that is being proposed. And again, it would be really nice if we could be reflecting that original form of the bridge that of the roof that we be losing. If you could, yeah, you see it from there, but you have to zoom in to be able to see it a bit better. So we've got housing, which is seriously substandard and none of it affordable. We've got transport, where we're providing a link to the Micmac cycleway, but we're not providing enough cycle parking for the people who are living there to use it. In heritage terms, we are saving 2 buildings, we are changing the roof, we're destroying the arches. We've got some mitigations for the wildlife and fragmented remains. So we demonstrate the site can be used, but there are a number of negatives. I would love to be enthusing about all aspects of this, and I'm sorry, I can't. It does show that there is a solution, but for me, this solution is not good enough for Derby. We've waited 50 years for something to come here, and I think we need to wait a little bit longer and have something that we can be truly proud of for the people who are going to live here in the future, for the wildlife that is already there, for the cycle access for the future, and for the buildings.
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I wrote down there are always going to be tensions. There's always going to be tensions on a scheme like this with so many conflicts, and it's for you as decision makers to weigh those conflicts in the balance. National space standards, they're not adopted. The architect might have shown a double bed in a room. I always say to them, why do you do that? Show me be realistic, show me a single bed. But I don't control the number. They don't need planning permission to put a double or a single bed in. So you can't assume it's 1 or 2 people. Yes, I'm sure the applicant will agree, they're smaller houses. And I suspect that will be reflected in the cost, so they'll be more affordable. They're not affordable units as you and I know them, but they're distinct to this part of Derby. I think the applicant told me they are a new brand, a new model for Derby. They obviously see there's a demand out there to get people from, I don't know, we talked about affordable housing and HIMOs earlier, to get people out of HIMOs into these sort of units and then stepping onto the market. In terms of the local nature reserve, I just went to Derbyshire Wildlife Trust comments and they've suggested conditions, recognising that there is a benefit here. Conditions to get, except for the broom rape, which has already been translocated, to get an understanding of a environmental management plan, landscape and biodiversity enhancement plan, species enhancement plan, etc., etc. Part of the package, the suite of conditions that Julia came up with, and we'll be continually talking to the developer to refine the headings that you've got into something which we're all comfortable with. And I must say, if at some stage we get to an impasse on those conditions with the developer, we'll revert back to Chair and Vice Chair to explain and explore avenues. But my bottom line is there's always going to be tensions, and it's for you to weigh up pros and cons. And there's a lot here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Anoa.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this comes back to one of my bugbears when it comes to some of these applications, and that would be the accommodation sizes. It seems to be a pattern now when applications come to this committee that we see that leeway of having not adopted national standards being applied, and it's almost like we're told this is what we have and you just have to go with it because, well, you know, it's not being formally adopted. But what that then does is that we run the risk of signaling to developers that Derby is a place where you can provide sort of accommodation that you wouldn't ordinarily provide elsewhere. And that worries me, you know, that we're setting that precedent where people can get away with just the bare minimum when it comes to spaces for people to live in, for families to live in. And it's I'm not sure that, that is what we want to be signaling to people. Lovely as the project may be, but we do need to make sure that we uphold a certain level of quality, in terms of room sizes, house sizes, for people who live and work in this city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Paul, do you want to comment on that one? Thank you.
Only, Chair, to say that the properties appear to be, I'm quoting from the report, appear to be designed to the minimum requirements for accessibility under the building regs, current building regulations, and not the anticipated new building regulations in terms of space standards. So, again, it's that balancing exercise. It is providing smaller units for potentially the first-time buyer. And if the architect's up there, I wouldn't have drawn double beds in there. That's a separate issue. It's about making sure that we've got something that is livable. Is it kitchen, living room downstairs, bedrooms upstairs on the two beds? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions from the committee? So we'll move to the vote. We'll move to the vote then. All those in favour of the application?
That's 6 in favour, Chair.
6 in favour. Any against?
None against.
None against. So that application goes through. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, committee. Thank you very much, speakers. Thank you. We move on now to item 5.3, which is land off Kingsway Boulevard, Kingsway, Derby. Ian, it's over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Housekeeping items to tidy the report up, Chair. Since the publication of the report, you have been provided with a supporting letter from the Chief Executive of the Hospital Trust, which promotes a scheme and underscores the importance of the application in the context of service delivery and patient care. This has been accompanied by a separate email, which Laura had generated following the pre-agenda meeting, which seeks to explain how public transport details will be communicated to patients and the overall rationale for selecting this site as the temporary car park to serve the hospital during the construction of its multi-storey car park on the site of car park number 6. That's the site on the screen, Chair. Secondly, in terms of the highways context, on page 114 of the document, attention is devoted to adoption of Kingsway Boulevard. By way of explanation, the Section 38 works, which is a highways technical approval, they have been approved, and there is agreement under Section 38 of the Highways Act. If the road isn't adopted, then the agreement will need to be varied to cover the alterations. Colleagues can comment on the separate approvals after my presentation if needed. On to the main report, Chair. As your report states, the proposed car park would be accessed directly off Kingsway Boulevard and serve 368 car parking spaces for a temporary period of up to 2 years. The car park would be used by visitors and patients to the Royal Derby Hospital. The car park is required to allow the construction of the previously approved multi-storey car park, which would, during construction, see the closure of car park 6, the largest car park on the hospital site. Car park 6 is located on the eastern side of the hospital site, adjacent to the maternity entrance, and accommodates 368 parking spaces as per the temporary solution. Clearly, a central material consideration with this application surrounds the impact of the car park and the redistribution of vehicle movements on the immediate highway network. As you'll all be aware, the immediate area can be congested at peak times in and around the Kingsway Junction and onto the strategic road network at the A38 Grand Canyon Junction. As your report states, the hospital has considered a number of other options to provide temporary parking, including using the Pride Park Park and Ride, land at Foresters Way Retail Park, and the staff car park on Manor Park Way. For different reasons, each of these options were discounted. The crucial benefit of the Manor Kingsway proposal is the amount of parking that can be provided in one location and the close proximity to the of the site to the hospital. In order for a visitor car park to be attractive to users, it has to be located as close to the hospital as possible. Otherwise, visitors will start to look for their own alternative parking in less appropriate locations. In summary, the hospital has limited options and there is no easy solution to providing a suitable temporary car park site. However, the hospital, landowner and local planning authority should be aware that the Manor Kingsway site comes with issues and that junction modelling predicts that the car park will significantly add to the congestion problems in the area, particularly during the weekday PM peak from 5 till 6. Junction modelling also predicts that the A38 full signalisation scheme to be delivered by Atelier Homes will improve the operation of the A511 Kingsway Junction and significantly help manage existing problems and the impact of the temporary car park. That scheme has technical approval. However, there is no fixed date set for its construction. As such, and with the historical problems around the removal of the signals at the A511 Kingsway Junction, if the car park does cause any significant problems, then the Highway Authority will not be in a position to adequately resolve them. As such, Chair, there may be some short-term pain with this proposal, but one has to be very mindful of the importance of the scheme in the context of delivering patient care at a time when hospital admissions have increased significantly following the unprecedented healthcare situation in large part generated by the COVID-19 pandemic. This position is clearly spelt out in the letter by the Chief Executive of the Hospital Trust, which were duly circulated. There are safeguarding conditions in place to ensure the car park is laid out, operated and controlled on a daily basis. Acoustic fencing has been agreed around the perimeter to safeguard neighbouring amenities, and there are various separate highway approvals that will be needed to ensure that the proposal is properly implemented. The site sits opposite the hospital and logistically it is, in my opinion, the most sensible short-term solution. Pedestrian access to the hospital can be achieved. Details of this are in the report, of course, Chair, and this will be a preferred option for certain patients and visitors. The application has generated objections from local residents and the proposal has been amended to relocate the access from Anmer Drive to the main boulevard. Subject to the full construction of the conditions as laid out in an abbreviated format in your report, I am satisfied that the proposal is the most appropriate temporary solution to serve the hospital and I promote the recommendation. And Chair, you have no speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Committee, Councillor Bonser, then Councillor Kerr. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate that this is probably a necessary, I won't call it a necessary evil, but a necessary step that's got to be taken to provide car parking for the staff and for the patients at the hospital. But having been obviously on the Royal site, we know that the layout that takes you round the outside of the site is such that you get a sign warning to tell you when a car park is full as you work your way around. So it'll say car park 6 full or whatever. I just wonder if there's a way that we could add a condition to this or include some sort of provision to avoid people going down that route if that car park is full, because there is obviously going to be an impact for the people who live on Kingsway Boulevard, and I would imagine there's going to be staggered times when people are, everyone's not going to all arrive at one time, but there's going to be a constant stream of disruption down there for the period of the car park's operation. So if there was a way that we could alert people at a early stage, a junction, whether that car park is operational, whether it's full, then I think that would avoid the prowling round to see whether people can get on there. Thank you.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you. Good point. Ian, please.
Yeah, I'll explore that, Chair. I think if we make provision for it in any resolution, an additional condition, and I'll talk to colleagues and others to see what we could sort out there in terms of where it could be sited, what it could be, what format. There might be various solutions, but if you're looking at a physical signage, then we'll have to look at the options there. But I think we could include that in any resolution and then come back to you and the Vice Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, can I support that? I think that's a really sensible idea, and I could imagine it being even as far away as the city side of the A5111 junction on the approach there, so people would know as they were coming from town as to whether you needed to go straight on or turn right, and I think would be really helpful. I have serious concerns about putting more traffic onto that section of Kingsway. It is not a good road. I have some concerns about the way the layout is, but I'm mindful that it's ideally for only 18 months, and you can't, let's not fight over perfection for that. I do wonder, given the time, whether it's necessary to actually take off all the topsoil, or whether they could put some sort of structure down on top of the topsoil and not have so much movement that was going to cause dust and so on. And it might be that there's an alternative highway solution for temporary parking on one of these mesh boardings or something that might be less disruptive to the area. And maybe we could explore that again, Chair. I think there's, for people who choose to walk from here, and I think if you're fit and able, and you're 20 minutes before your appointment time because you've been caught in the congestion yourself and the minibus isn't there, you might well choose to walk. And the walking route is not intuitive if you've not done it before, and I think we should be ensuring that there's signage put up and maintained for the use of the car park so that people can get from the car park to the hospital without getting lost on the way. And I think that will give people more confidence to walk. And the final thing is that it won't change many, but for some people, having not just a publicity about the bus routes, but also clear cycle signage and parking for the hospital may divert some people from joining that queue on Kingsway. I have heard unofficially that their proposals to improve cycle parking on site is not going to be done until after the multi-storey car park is completed. And I don't know whether this has been negotiated as part of the conditions for that application. But this is the time when people can be persuaded to think differently, because they're having to think differently about where they're parking. So having been once and waited for more than 20 minutes for their shuttle bus, they might think, actually, I could cycle and it would only take me 20 minutes to cycle, and therefore it'll be quicker overall. And so this is the time when we ought to be ensuring that we have got good alternative active travel on site. So can we also put something down in terms of a condition to deal with that side of things on site? And it'll take, if it takes a few cars off Kingsway, that's a bonus as well.
Thanks, Lucy.
I'd suggest we deal with that by an informative, Chair, because it's beyond the red edge of the application site. It's within the main hospital site. If you're looking at, I would suggest promoting delivering, improved cycle parking earlier than the multi-storey car park or whatever their aspirations are, and saying that, committee would want to see that moved forward in any programme rather than be at the back of the programme. So I can do that, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Rawson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's been said it's not ideal, but I think in the circumstances, this is the most sensible solution. Because of course, if the hospital trust did nothing, that doesn't resolve the problem either, because you'd still have the staff and patients displaced from car park 6, and that traffic would have to go somewhere. So probably more chaotic results. So I think this is probably the best way to deal with it. And we've had some good comments from members of the committee about how we might ameliorate that further. Just a couple of questions in terms of, I presume that if necessary, this can be extended beyond the 2 years if necessary. And secondly, I presume that the land use will go back to the original commercial use, and any development that was planned on there will in effect just be delayed whilst the car park's there. So whilst it's possible to extend it if necessary, it's not going to be permanent.
Ian?
Yes and yes.
Very succinct, that was. Councillor Holmes first. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one on page 114, which he talks about Kingsway Boulevard becoming adopted, which we know can be a very slow process with new developments. It can take many years. And that has to happen to facilitate a section 278 agreement to complete the access to the car park and all of the rest of it. So just a quick query really from officers to, we'd like this process, if we agree it tonight, to happen as soon as possible. Because there is going to be some pain whilst this is delivered and whilst this is being used to facilitate the construction of the multi-storey car park. So are we in a position to know when the adoption process will be completed to facilitate the sections 278, and is that going to be in good time to allow the trust to move forward, the applicant, sorry, to move forward as quickly as possible to get this over and done with and deliver the benefits that the other application is designed for? And one other thing is probably on the periphery of that is we have what's expected to be, in my opinion, a go for the A38 junction improvement scheme, which is going to involve further disruption and very significant changes to the highways infrastructure in that area of just one of the potential 3 areas. Again, timings, we really want all of this kind of thing to be out of the way and done with before we start moving towards what will be a very big transport scheme in the area, and will impact first negatively on Kingsway and then very positively on Kingsway when it's delivered, in my opinion. So really juggling those balls together really to find out if we have a ducks in a row to try and make this as smooth as possible and as quick as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Ian?
I'll defer to my learned friends, Chair.
Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Holmes is the sort of thing that keeps me awake at night as well. What I will say about the A38 first, I think that's still got to go through a hearing through the High Court, which is to do with the economics behind the scheme. That is due to be heard on the 14th of May, after which I think there will be a 6 weeks cool-off period. And my understanding of it is that potentially the construction of the A38 will probably start 2 years after. On top of that, the first year of scheme will be all offline, so there's probably a window of about 3 years, I suspect. That's my guess. So hopefully none of this will coincide, and this car park will be done and dusted by then. In terms of the section 38, not all of that is in our control. Part of it, for example, requires the sewage and drainage system being signed off by Severn Trent, so there are third parties involved in that. As I understand it, we are almost at that point, but it obviously requires that third party to basically sign it off. So we are, in a way, beholden to them. But obviously, it is then a risk, I think, in terms of the delivery of this. On top of that, that means to say that something like a section 278 can't really come until that road is adopted, because you need a legal process for constructing the access to the site. And at the moment, it's obviously on private property. So there is a little bit of a juggling act here, and I guess a little bit of a risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Kerr.
Sorry to come back, but this is an area where, when the Kingsway Retail Park is congested, people will be tempted to park to be able to walk down rather than get caught in traffic on Kingsway Retail Park. Or people who may want to choose to park here and then to be commuting to the hospital. Has the hospital addressed concerns about abuse of the car parking spaces other than by patients and visitors who should be using it? and how are they going to monitor that? Because if it's too much abused, it may not provide the capacity they need.
Any answer on that, Ian?
Pass on that one, Chair, but I'll find out for you. And if we need to, could we have a question mark condition on that in terms of if we need to add something in terms of a management solution? I'll find out, and then if I'll revert back to you and Councillor Kerr on that.
Good with me, that is.
Yep.
Lucy, you okay with that? Kieran, do you want to come in? Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree with the suggestion that was made about signage to try and direct the need to alternative facilities. But I want to contribute to the thought leadership on that. Drivers' decision-making in terms of parking at the hospital isn't necessarily driven by whether or not there is a space. It's driven in instances differently. So, as some of you may know, for example, 9 months ago, my wife and I were blessed with a little boy. I learned, as a frequent visitor to Car Park 6, I learned that sometimes I need to be there quickly and on site, but I also learned that sometimes I don't need to be there quickly or indeed on site. So I wonder if there's a solution more along the lines of, in such a scenario, park here, and in such a scenario, go over here. That kind of thought leadership, rather than there is space and there isn't space. I know that's complicated, and I know that I'm creating thought and meetings and consultations and all sorts of things, but that's something to think about. One more thing from me, a question on the shuttle buses and the environmental impact. Can we make conditions that the environmental impact is minimised and vehicles are used that minimise disruption to the environment?
Ian, you okay with that?
Yeah,
with your homework as well.
I think we can promote that as an informative note that the low emission vehicles or whatever are employed, because it will be a constant shuttle service. So, yeah.
Lovely. Councillor Bolton would like to move to the vote. So, all those in favour?
Sorry, Chair, can I
Oh,
just
you
clarify
can,
just
Stephen.
with the-
Sorry, I do apologise.
Just my apologies. Just just to confirm with Ian that you're okay with the conditions suggested by Councillor Kerr in relation to the signage to and from the hospital. Are you okay? The pedestrian route, yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. With those additional conditions.
We can move to it. Thank you, Steve. So, move to the vote. All those in favour of the application?
Unanimous, Chair?
That's unanimous. It is. Just one more point. I was prodded by Paul at the end of the Frygate one. We didn't vote on the listed building application because there were two separate. So you're going to move to the vote.
Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
Chair, I was going to say that myself and Stephen assumed that you had, that was part and parcel of the, but it's worth clarifying that.
So Councillor Bolton's moved to the vote. So can we vote on the listed building application for Frygate, please? All those in favour?
That was 6, wasn't it?
We've got
That's
8 there, Chair.
8 for... Are those against? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Got out of that one quick. I don't think anyone was watching anyway, Paul, so I think we'll be all right on that. We move on to, I don't know where we are now, potential site visits. We've just got one, Ian, I believe.
Yes, that's the site, Chair. It's just under 100 homes, I believe, on that Green Wedge parcel of land off the Hollow.
Yes, Councillor Holmes. Yes.
Okay. The area just to the west of that has recently been taken off that bit of Green Wedge. So the sort of slightly faded house where it says Allen Avenue, that suite there has already lost from the Green Wedge. And this is the next bit of the Green Wedge, which would be disappearing within 5 years, before we've had time for the Green Wedge to resettle without that land. I think people ought to see what's there at the moment and be able to come and appreciate it. There's a footpath around the edge of it, but I think it would be useful to see what the layouts proposed is like and what impact it's going to have also on the housing. The other element here is to actually be able to hear the amount of noise that there is coming from the now very busy roads along there. The double dual carriageway is the A38, and it makes a really quite appreciative amount of noise along there, and it's the Allen Avenue. You can see on Allen Avenue that there is housing close up to it. The next section has not got housing on it, and that's the recent bit.
Lucy, can I just interrupt you? We just want to know
So,
whether we want
I
a
think
site
I was
visit
gonna
or not,
say-
really.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I didn't want
I'm sorry,
to.
Chair.
I
As I
didn't
say,
want
Chair,
a brief history of Littleover.
I'm very heartened
So-
to hear Councillor Kerr is very engaged already in this, because so am I. But I would say, yes, can we go for a site visit, please?
That's all I wanted to know, Matt. We'll go for a site visit, please, Ian. Thank you very much. So if you could organise that bit for us, thank you very much. Thanks, Lucy. So we
Yeah, can I just raise one more issue whilst we're talking about site visits? We are all being bombarded about emails in relation to the Rose Hill Bowling Green. Is there any indication when that will be coming to committee? Because I feel we should definitely have a site visit there. I don't want it to be rushed, obviously, because of the consultation we're getting. So I just wanted to air it now, just to see if there's any specific dates in mind or when it's likely to come to committee.
I'm going to say, I don't know when it's coming to committee, but yes, it's probably worth having a site visit. And I know the Hollow and the Bowling Green are quite distinct, separate parts of the city, but we'll try and arrange them either on the same day or close to, so we can get as many members to both sites as possible. Because it is worth seeing, I think, yes.
Good with me. Thanks for bringing it up, Sarah. Thanks, Paul. And with that, we come to the end of the, is it the administrative year, the municipal year? So, yes,
thank you for all your work, Chair. It's been
Thank you very much for all your thoughts and comments and discussions, committee. You may go, go on, Flea. And can I thank all the officers for all turning up on every other Wednesday that we have these and putting you through everything as well. So thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.